The message came from the darkness between stars on a cold winter morning in the year 2347. It was not a greeting. It was not an invitation. It was a demand. High Counselor Vrethon stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, his 4 yellow eyes fixed on the holographic image of a small blue planet spinning slowly in the void. The chamber was vast, carved from the heart of a dead moon orbiting Nexus Prime, and it had witnessed the surrender of countless species over 12,000 years. The walls were lined with the banners of conquered civilizations, each one a reminder of the Council's absolute power. Around him sat the representatives of 800 star systems. The Velkhani, tall and armored in natural bone plates, controlled the military. The Morthani, ancient beings of crystal and light, provided wisdom and technology. A dozen other species filled the remaining seats, each one bound to the Council through treaties signed under threat of annihilation. "These humans," Vrethon announced, his deep voice echoing through the chamber, "have been watched for 300 of their years. They are young. They are weak. They have barely learned to travel between the planets of their own star. They will submit to Council authority, or they will be erased from existence." The chamber hummed with agreement. This was how it had always been. This was how it would always be. 12 light years away, Ambassador Kira Holloway received the transmission aboard the deep space vessel Endurance. She was 42 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She had spent her entire career preparing for contact with alien life. She had written papers, attended conferences, and developed protocols for every possible scenario. None of them had prepared her for this. "They are giving us 90 of their standard cycles to respond," her communications officer reported. His name was Danny Marsh, a young man from the orbital stations around Jupiter who had never set foot on Earth. "It is roughly 60% of our days." Kira read the message again. The translation was clear enough. Surrender all military assets. Accept Council governance. Provide tribute in the form of resources and labor. Failure to comply would result in what the message called corrective action. She had seen this language before. In history books, in the records of empires that had crushed smaller nations beneath their boots. The words were different, but the meaning was the same. Kneel or die. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," she said quietly. "Priority 1. And Danny, I want everything we can learn about these species. Their biology, their culture, their history, everything." On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Secretary General Marcus Webb convened an emergency session of the Coalition Parliament within hours. The Great Chamber in Geneva, built after the Unity Wars of the 22nd century, was filled to capacity. Representatives from every nation, every colony, every orbital habitat had gathered to decide the fate of humanity. The debate raged for 18 days. Some called for immediate surrender. They pointed to the Council's fleet of millions of warships. They cited the technological gap that separated humanity from these ancient civilizations. They argued that resistance was not just futile, but suicidal. "Cannot fight them," Senator Harold Price of the North American Union declared. "We have 47 combat-capable vessels. They have millions. The mathematics of this situation are clear. We must negotiate the best terms we can and pray they show mercy." Others disagreed. Admiral Grace Tanner, commander of Earth's Small Defense Force, stood before the assembly with fire in her eyes. "Mercy," she repeated. "You speak of mercy from beings who have conquered 800 worlds, who have enslaved species for millennia? There is no mercy in their vocabulary. There is only submission. And I, for one, would rather die on my feet than live on my knees." The chamber erupted in chaos. Arguments turned to shouting. Shouting turned to threats. For a moment, it seemed the coalition would tear itself apart before the Council. Even arrived. Then Dr. Linda Torres asked to speak. She was a small woman, 53 years old, as an anthropologist from the Buenos Aires Institute who had spent her life studying how civilizations interacted. She walked to the central podium with calm, measured steps and waited until the chamber fell silent. "You are both wrong," she said simply. "Senator Price is wrong, because surrender will not save us. The Council does not want allies. They want subjects. And subjects who surrender are treated no better than subjects who resist. Sometimes worse, because they are seen as weak. She turned to Admiral Tanner. And Admiral, you are wrong, because dying bravely accomplishes nothing. The dead do not resist. The dead do not hope. The dead are simply dead. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from every corner of human civilization. Every empire has weaknesses, not in their weapons or their ships, but in their assumptions. They have ruled unchallenged for 12,000 years. They have never encountered a species like us. They look at our small planet and our short history, and they see primitives. They see prey. And that is their mistake. She paused, letting her words settle into the silence. Cannot defeat them in battle. Not today. But we can make them bleed. We can make them doubt. We can show them that the cost of conquering humanity is higher than they are willing to pay. And while they hesitate, while they bleed, we learn, we adapt. We grow stronger. Secretary General Webb leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Doctor? Linda smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. I am proposing that we become the most expensive mistake the Galactic Council has ever made. The vote was close. Closer than anyone expected. But when the final tally was counted, humanity had made its choice. On the 47th day, Ambassador Kira Holloway transmitted humanity's response. It was broadcast on every frequency the Council had provided, encoded in every language their translation systems could process. It was a single word.
Ow!
In the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. High Counselor Vrithon stared at the message in disbelief. In 12,000 years, no species had ever refused the Council's demands. Some had bargained. Some had begged. Some had threatened. But none had simply said no. They are insane, he muttered. They must be insane, Elder Sithra of the Morthani Collective, the oldest being in the chamber, watched the holographic image of Earth spinning in the void. She was 3,000 years old, and she had seen many species rise and fall. Something about these humans troubled her in a way she could not explain. Perhaps, she said quietly, or perhaps they know something we do not. Vrethon turned to his military commanders. Prepare the fleet. These primitives wish to learn the price of defiance. We will teach them. Across the galaxy, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, humanity began to prepare for war. They knew they were outnumbered. They knew they were outgunned. They knew the odds were impossible. But they also knew something the Council had forgotten long ago. Impossible odds had never stopped humans before. The Council fleet arrived at Proxima Centauri on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that humanity had no names for. Each vessel was larger than anything humans had ever built, bristling with cannons and missile tubes and energy, projectors that could crack a planet in half. Fleet Commander Torith of the Velcani Hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unbreakable Will, and surveyed the tiny human colony before him. Proxima Station was a rough collection of habitation. Modules and mining platforms clustered around the fourth planet of the system. It supported perhaps 50,000 humans. It possessed, according to his intelligence reports, exactly 43 combat-capable vessels. None of them were larger than a frigate. Send the standard ultimatum, Torith commanded. His voice was deep and cold, the voice of a warrior who had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. They have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we begin corrective action. Commander Samuel Hayes received the ultimatum in his cramped office aboard the defense platform orbiting Proxima 4. He was 51 years old. A former mining engineer who had transferred to military service when the colony needed defenders. He had never fired a weapon in anger in his entire life. He read the message twice, then set it aside and called his senior officers. They want us to surrender, he told them simply. They are giving us 1 hour. Lieutenant Commander Bethany Cole, his tactical officer, studied the sensor readouts with calm, analytical eyes. She was 34, a thin woman with short red hair and a mind that processed information faster than most computers. 300 ships, she reported. Standard Council battle formation. They are arranging themselves in a classic assault wedge, with heavy capital ships in the center and lighter escorts on the flanks. Very efficient. Very predictable. Predictable, Sam repeated. That is interesting. Commander Derek Young, the head of engineering, leaned forward. He was a large man with hands scarred by decades of work with heavy machinery. Sam, I know that look. What are you thinking? Sam walked to the tactical display and studied the enemy formation. The council ships were beautiful in their way. Perfect geometric shapes designed by species who had been building warships for millennia. They moved with precision that spoke of absolute confidence. They have fought 1,000 battles, Sam said slowly. They have conquered 800 worlds. And in all that time, they have never lost. You know why? Because they are bigger and stronger and better equipped, Derek suggested. No, because every species they have faced has fought the same way. Line up your ships. Fire your weapons. Try to match their strength with your own. Sam shook his head. We cannot do that. We do not have the strength to match. So we need to fight a different war. He turned to Bethany. Those mining charges we have been stockpiling for the asteroid extraction project. How many do we have? Bethany checked her datapad. 4,700. But they are not weapons. They are designed to break up asteroids for processing. They break things apart, Sam said. That sounds like a weapon to me. How long to deploy them in the asteroid belt between us and the Council fleet? Bethany's eyes widened as she understood. 6 hours. Maybe 5 if we push the crews hard. We have 1 hour before they attack. But they do not know. We are not going to surrender. They expect us to spend that hour debating and arguing and pleading for mercy. Sam smiled grimly. They are wrong. Send the response. Tell them we need 48 hours to evacuate civilians and prepare formal surrender documents. That should buy us time, and if they do not agree, then we improvise. Fleet Commander Torith received the human response with something close to amusement. 48 hours to surrender? These primitives were even more pathetic than he had expected. They were trying to delay the inevitable, probably hoping for some miracle that would never come. Grant them their request, he told his communications officer. Let them savor their final hours of freedom. It will make their eventual submission all the sweeter. Sam Hayes used every minute of those 48 hours. Mining vessels that should have been evacuating civilians instead worked around the clock, planting explosive charges throughout the asteroid belt. Communications satellites were repositioned. Emergency broadcast systems were programmed with thousands of false signals. Every ship in the defense fleet was loaded with unconventional surprises. When the deadline passed, Torith moved his fleet forward in perfect formation. His ships advanced through the asteroid belt with contemptuous ease, their shields deflecting the occasional rock that drifted too close. They were less than an hour from weapons range when the first explosion lit up the void. A mining charge detonated against the hull of a destroyer, shattering its engine section. Before the crew could react, 3 more explosions ripped through nearby vessels. The perfectly arranged formation suddenly became chaos, as ships tried to evade threats they could not see. What is happening? Torith demanded. Unknown Commander. Our sensors are not detecting any enemy vessels. The explosions seem to be coming from the asteroids themselves. It's impossible. Asteroids do not explode. They did. Again and again. The Council fleet found itself flying through a minefield that should not exist, taking damage from weapons that should not work. And then the human ships appeared. They came from hiding places within the asteroids, from behind mining platforms, from the shadows of gas giants. 43 tiny vessels against 300 warships. It should have been slaughtered, it was. Just not the kind Torith expected. The human ships did not fight in formation. They darted and weaved through the asteroid field like insects, using the rocks as cover against the Council's superior weapons. They fired missiles that were little more than converted mining equipment. Crude and inaccurate, but effective enough when they hit. They broadcast false signals that made the Council's sensors show phantom enemies everywhere. When Torith ordered his fleet to pursue. They found themselves chasing shadows through a maze of stone. Ships that tried to follow the humans took damage from hidden explosives. Ships that held back were picked apart by hit-and-run attacks. The beautiful formation that had conquered 100 worlds dissolved into chaos. The battle lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of confusion and frustration and mounting casualties. When Torith finally ordered a retreat, he had lost 112 ships. The humans had lost 19. On Nexus Prime, the council chamber fell into stunned silence as the reports came in. In 12,000 years, no species had ever inflicted such losses on a council fleet. The primitives from the small blue planet had done the impossible. "This changes nothing," Vrethon declared, but his voice lacked conviction. "We will send a larger fleet. We will crush them completely." Elder Sithra rose from her seat, her crystalline body catching the light. "Perhaps," she said, "but at what cost? Today they killed 112 ships with 43. Tomorrow, what will they do with 400? With 1,000? She looked around the chamber. "We have made an assumption, my colleagues. We assumed these humans were like every other species we have conquered. We assumed they would fight our war by our rules. We assumed wrong." In the debris field around Proxima 4, Commander Samuel Hayes surveyed the wreckage of both fleets. His people were exhausted. His ships were damaged. He had won a battle, but the war was far from over. "They will come back," Bethany said quietly. "With more ships. More weapons." "I know," Sam replied. "But today we taught them something they needed to learn. We taught them that we are not easy prey. We taught them that humans do not surrender. And we taught them that when you back us into a corner, we come out fighting." He looked at the distant stars, knowing that somewhere out there, the council was already planning their revenge. "Let them come," he said. "We will be ready." The council learned from Proxima. They understood now that humans could not be crushed with simple force. The primitives were too clever, too unpredictable, too willing to sacrifice everything for victory. A direct assault would cost more ships than the council was. Willing to lose, so they changed their approach. Agent. Prime Velix was the most decorated operative. In the history of the council's intelligence directorate, he was a Shethkai, a species that could alter their appearance to mimic any humanoid form. He had infiltrated 17 civilizations, destabilized governments, and engineered the collapse of 3 interstellar nations. He was patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. "Your mission is simple," Director Colvin told him before departure. "The humans defeated us in battle because they were united. Break that unity. Turn them against each other. When they are weak and divided, our fleets will finish what they started." Velix arrived on Earth 3 months after the Battle of Proxima. He wore the face of a businessman from the European Federation, complete with fabricated identification, manufactured history, and enough credits to open doors that should have remained closed. Within weeks, he had made contact with politicians, military officers, and corporate executives. Within months, he had begun to plant the seeds of division. He whispered to the fearful that surrender was still possible, that the council might show mercy to those who cooperated. He whispered to the ambitious that power could be theirs if they positioned themselves correctly. He whispered to the suspicious that their allies could not be trusted, that everyone had secret agendas. For a time it worked. Arguments broke out in the coalition parliament. Military commanders accused each other of incompetence. Corporations hoarded resources instead of sharing them. The unity that had won Proxima began to crack. Velix reported his progress with satisfaction. This was how the game was played. This was how empires fell. He never saw Nina Reyes coming. Nina was 31 years old, counterintelligence officer for the Coalition's newly formed Stellar Security Division. She had grown up in the slums of Manila, earned her education through military service, and developed an instinct for deception that bordered on supernatural. She could spot a lie from across a room. She could sense manipulation, like other people sensed changes in the weather. Something about the recent political chaos felt wrong to her. The divisions were too convenient, the arguments too perfectly timed. It felt orchestrated, like a piece of music played by an unseen conductor. "I think we have a problem," she told her supervisor, Director Carlos Reyes, No relation despite the shared name. Someone is playing us. The Council. Maybe, probably, but I cannot prove it yet. She studied the reports on her desk, looking for patterns that others might miss. I need time and resources. Give both. Find whoever is doing this and stop them. Nina spent 6 months building her case. She tracked financial transactions, analyzed communication patterns, and interviewed dozens of people who had suddenly changed their political positions. Slowly, carefully, she assembled a picture of an invisible enemy working to tear humanity apart. The breakthrough came when she identified Patricia Dunn. Patricia was a mid-level administrator in the Coalition's trade ministry. She had access to economic data, shipping schedules, and resource allocations. She had also, according to Nina's investigation, recently come into contact with a European businessman whose background did not quite add up. Instead of arresting Patricia, Nina made her an offer. I know you have been feeding information to someone, Nina said during their private meeting. I know you believe you are helping humanity by cooperating with the Council, but you are wrong. They are not offering peace. They are offering slavery. And when they have what they want, they will discard. You like garbage? Patricia's face went pale. How do you know about him? Because finding hidden things is what I do. Now you have a choice. You can continue working for them, and when we catch your handler, you will share his fate. Or you can work for me, and maybe, just maybe, you can help save everything you thought you were protecting. Patricia chose wisely. For 18 months, Patricia Dunn fed carefully crafted disinformation to Agent Prime Felix. False military deployments. Fake political developments. Manufactured scandals that led nowhere. Every piece of intelligence he gathered was tainted. Every report he sent to the Council was useless. Meanwhile, Nina used Patricia to learn how Council intelligence operated, their communication methods, their extraction protocols, their chain of command, information that would prove invaluable in the years to come. When Felix finally realized something was wrong, it was too late. The arrest happened on a rainy evening in New Shanghai. Felix was walking to a meeting that did not exist, following directions that led him into a trap. He found himself surrounded by Coalition security forces, his disguise useless, his escape routes blocked. Nina was waiting for him in the interrogation room. You played a good game, she told him. Better than most. But you made one mistake. What mistake? Felix demanded. His appearance had shifted back to his natural form, gray skin and angular features that looked almost human, but not quite. You assumed that loyalty could be bought. Among your species, maybe it can. Among ours, loyalty is earned through trust, through sacrifice, through shared struggle. Patricia did not betray you because I threatened her. She betrayed you because she realized you were never really on her side. The interrogation lasted 3 weeks. Felix resisted at first, but Nina was patient. She did not use torture or threats. She simply talked to him, hour after hour, day after day, showing him that everything he believed about humanity was wrong. In the end, he told her everything. The Council was not united. 800 star systems bound together by fear and mutual suspicion, not loyalty or shared purpose. The ruling species despised each other, cooperated only because the alternative was destruction. A dozen smaller civilizations had been conquered so long ago, they had forgotten what freedom meant. They are afraid of you, Felix admitted during one of their final sessions. Not your weapons or your ships. They are afraid of what you represent. A species that refuses to kneel. If you can defy the Council and survive, others might try. And if enough others try, the whole system falls apart, Nina finished. Felix nodded slowly. That is why they sent me. They thought if they could not crush you from outside, they could destroy you from within. They underestimated you. They underestimated all of you, Nina smiled. They will not make that mistake again. But neither will we. She stood and walked to the door. What happens to me now? Felix asked. That depends on you. You can spend the rest of your life in a cell. Or you can help us. Help us understand your people, your government, your weaknesses. Help us find a way to end this war without destroying everything. Why would I do that? Because you are tired. I can see it in your eyes. You have spent your whole life serving masters who see you as a tool, not a person. Maybe it is time to try something different. She left him alone with his thoughts. 3 days later, Felix agreed to cooperate. The Shadow War was not over, but the balance had shifted. Humanity had learned to play the Council's game, and they were proving to be very quick learners indeed. Ambassador. Kira Holloway spent 2 years in a Council detention facility before the prisoner exchange. The cell was small and cold, the food was barely enough to survive, and she was allowed no contact with other prisoners. The Council wanted to break her, to show humanity what happened to those who defied their authority. They failed. When Kira emerged from captivity, it was thinner and harder. Her hair had gone completely gray, but her eyes burned with a fire that had not been there before. And she carried something far more valuable than her own freedom. She carried names, contacts, allies. The Velkhani guards talked to me sometimes. She reported to Secretary General Webb. They complained about their commanders, about the Council, about being treated as expendable soldiers for species who despised them. The Morthani prisoners in the cells near mine were ancient scholars who remembered a time before the Council existed. They told me stories of their history, their culture, the dreams they had abandoned when conquest became easier than cooperation. She paused, letting the implications settle. The Council presents itself as unified and invincible. It is a lie. Beneath the surface, there is resentment, frustration, and a hunger for something different. We can use that. The operation was codenamed Prometheus. It began small, with human agents slipping into Council space disguised as traitors and refugees. They did not preach rebellion. They did not distribute weapons or organize resistance cells. They simply asked questions. Why do you fight for masters who despise you? What did your ancestors believe before the Council came? What would your children inherit if nothing changed? On Velen Prime, a young warrior named Koreth heard these questions from a human trader named George Mitchell. George was 60 years old, former professor of philosophy who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission humanity had ever attempted. He spent 3 months on Velen Prime, living in the slums of the capital city, learning the language and customs of the Velkhani people. Your species has served the Council for 4,000 years, George said one evening, sharing a meal with Koreth and his family. In all that time, what have you gained? Koreth was silent for a long moment. We have survived, he finally said. That is more than many species can claim. Survival is not living. It is simply not dying. There is a difference. Easy words from a human. Your species has never known conquest. You do not understand what it means to live under the Council's shadow. George nodded slowly. You are right. I do not understand. But I know that my ancestors faced similar shadows, and they found ways to escape them. Sometimes it took generations. Sometimes it cost everything. But they never stopped trying because they believed their children deserved better than shadows. He stood to leave. I'm not asking you to rebel. I am not asking you to fight. I am only asking you to remember that you were not always servants, and to wonder if you must always be. Similar conversations happened on 100 worlds. Human agents moved through Council space like seeds carried on the wind, planting ideas that would take root in fertile soil. They found allies among the oppressed, the forgotten, the dreamers who had never stopped hoping for something better. Kira Holloway coordinated the operation from a hidden base in the outer systems. She had become something more than an ambassador now. She was a symbol, a legend, the human who had survived Council imprisonment and returned stronger than before. Species who had never met a human knew her name. We are not trying to start a war, she explained to her growing network of contacts. We are trying to end one. But to do that, we need the Council's subjects to stop seeing themselves as subjects. We need them to remember that they have choices. The Council noticed, eventually. High Counselor Vrethone ordered a crackdown on suspected human sympathizers. Security forces raided homes, interrogated families, executed anyone found with forbidden materials. It was exactly the response Kira had predicted. Tyranny breeds resistance, she told her allies. And resistance, crushed too harshly, breeds martyrs. Every time the Council executes an innocent, they create 10 more enemies. Every time they raid a home, they prove that our words were true. Spark uprising began on Velen. Prime when a Council garrison executed 100 civilians for suspected collaboration with humans. Among the dead was Korith's youngest daughter, child of 12 who had never spoken to a human in her life. Korith had been a loyal soldier for 30 years. He had fought and bled and watched his brothers die for the Council's glory. He had told himself it was necessary, that survival required sacrifice, that his people had no choice. Now he had a choice. Within days, nearly a third of the Velkhani military had declared independence from Council authority. Ships that had served the Empire for generations turned their weapons against their former masters. Soldiers who had known nothing but obedience finally learned the taste of freedom. The fire spread on Morthane Prime. The ancient elders who had dreamed of the old days emerged from their meditation chambers to lead their people in peaceful resistance. They stopped working in the factories that powered the Council's war machine. They stopped providing the technology that kept the Empire running. They simply stopped cooperating. A dozen smaller species, inspired by the Velkhani rebellion and the Morthani resistance, began their own uprisings. Some were violent, others were quiet acts of defiance, but all of them sent the same message to the Council. We are not afraid anymore. Hi, Councillor Vrethon called an emergency session of the Council. The chamber that had witnessed 12,000 years of absolute power was now filled with panic and accusations. The humans have done this, Vrethon declared. They have infected our subjects with their madness, their delusions of freedom. We must crush them once and for all. We must make an example so terrible that no one will ever dare defy us again. Elder Sithra rose from her seat. She was 1,000 years old, and she had seen many crises in her long life. But she had never seen fear like this in the eyes of her colleagues. And how do you propose to do that? She asked quietly. Our fleet is scattered across 800 systems, trying to suppress rebellions that multiply faster than we can respond. Our economy is collapsing because the species who do our labor have stopped working. Our intelligence networks have been compromised by human agents we cannot identify. She looked around the chamber. We built this council on fear. Fear of our weapons, fear of our power, fear of what we would do to those who defied us. But fear is a poor foundation. Cracks appeared, and the humans found them. Now, the entire structure is crumbling, and I do not know if we have the strength to rebuild it. Then what do you suggest? Vrethon demanded. Sithra was silent for a long moment. I suggest we consider the possibility that we have already lost. And I suggest we decide what kind of future we want before the decision is made for us. Across the galaxy, humanity watched the Council's empire begin to fracture. They had started this war as a single species against 800 worlds. Now, they had allies among the stars, friends who shared their hunger for freedom, partners who were willing to fight alongside them. Kira Holloway looked at the reports flowing across her screen and allowed herself a small smile. Phase 2 is complete, she said to her staff. The Council is bleeding. Now it is time for Phase 3. What is Phase 3? Someone asked. Kira's smile faded, replaced by determination. We finished this. The final battle was not what anyone expected. Admiral Christopher Grant led the human fleet through Council space, moving from system to system, not to conquer, but to liberate. He was 64 years old, a veteran of Proxima and a dozen engagements since. His flagship, the Resilience, bore the scars of every battle it had survived. Some said the ship was held together by luck and stubbornness. Chris said the same thing about himself. The fleet that followed him was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels flew alongside Velkhani warships. Morthani transports carried supplies and refugees. A dozen other species contributed what they could, from aging freighters to cutting-edge destroyers captured from Council loyalists. We are approaching Nexus Prime, his first officer reported. Commander Lucy Park was 42, a tactical genius who had planned most of their successful campaigns. Long-range sensors show minimal defensive presence. Most of the Council's remaining forces have pulled back to the station. Chris studied the tactical display. Nexus Prime had been the heart of the Council for 12,000 years. The great station orbiting the dead moon was where treaties had been signed, where empires had been born and destroyed, where countless species had knelt before their masters today. The masters were waiting for someone to kneel to them. They would be waiting a long time. Open a channel, Chris ordered. All frequencies. The communication officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Chris stood straight and addressed an empire. This is Admiral Christopher Grant of the Human Coalition. We are not here to destroy you. We are not here for revenge. We are here because the galaxy deserves better than fear, and we believe you do too. Stand down your weapons and let us talk. There has been enough death. For a long moment there was silence. Then the Council's response came. Not weapons fire, as many had expected, but a simple message. Proceed to the station. We will receive your representatives in the Council chamber. The chamber was vast and ancient, filled with the weight of history. Banners of conquered civilizations lined the walls, testament to 12,000 years of absolute power. The seats of the Council representatives were arranged in a great circle, the High Councilor's throne at the center. Secretary General Marcus Webb walked into that chamber with his head held high. He was 73 years old now, gray and weathered by 6 years of war. Behind him came Ambassador Kira Holloway, Admiral Grant, and representatives from every species that had joined humanity's cause. High Counselor Vrethon watched them approach. His 4 eyes were weary, his posture no longer proud, but defeated. Around him, the remaining council members sat in silence. Many seats were empty, their occupants having fled or defected or simply given up. You have won, Vrethon said. His voice was flat, emotionless. The council acknowledges its defeat. Name your terms. Webb stopped in the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled aliens. Some stared back with hatred, others with curiosity. A few, like Elder Sithra, watched with something that might have been hope. You thought you knew what we were, Webb said finally. You looked at our small planet, our brief history, our primitive technology, and you saw prey. You thought we would bend like every other species you had conquered. You were wrong. He paused, letting his words echo through the ancient hall. We are not conquerors. We did not cross the galaxy to enslave you, or humiliate you, or take revenge for what you tried to do to us. We came here because the galaxy was broken, and we believed it could be fixed. Vrethon's eyes narrowed. Then what do you want? If not conquest, if not revenge, what? Partnership. Webb reached into his jacket and produced a document. A new alliance. Not built on fear or domination, but on cooperation and mutual respect. Every species that joins will have an equal voice. Every world will govern itself. Disputes will be resolved through negotiation, not force. And the strength of all will protect the rights of each. Impossible, Vrethon said. Such an alliance could never hold. Without a strong hand to maintain order, the galaxy will dissolve into chaos. Webb smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. That is what tyrants always say. They claim that without their control, everything will fall apart. But it is a lie they tell themselves to justify their power. The truth is that beings can cooperate without being forced. They can choose peace without being threatened. They can build something better than empire if they are given the chance. He turned to face the entire chamber. We are offering you that chance. Today, right now. You can cling to the old ways, the ways of fear and domination, and watch your civilization crumble around you. Or you can take our hand and help us build something new. Elder Sithra rose from her ancient seat. Her crystalline body caught the light as she crossed the chamber floor with slow, deliberate steps. She stopped before Webb and studied his face with eyes that had witnessed millennia. You are young, she said. Your species is young. You have no idea what you are asking us to do. To abandon 12,000 years of tradition? To trust beings we have spent centuries trying to conquer. I know, Webb admitted. It is a lot to ask. But I also know that the old way is dying. You can feel it. The council you built cannot survive what we have started. The only question is what comes next. Cythera was silent for a long moment. Then she extended one withered hand toward Webb. We accept, she said, and we apologize. We should have recognized you for what you were from the beginning. Webb took her hand gently. What are we? Cythera's expression softened. You are exactly what this galaxy needed. A species stubborn enough to refuse impossible odds, clever enough to find another way, and generous enough to offer mercy to those who offered none. One by one, the other council members rose from their seats. Some approached to offer their own acceptance. Others simply watched, still uncertain, still afraid. But the tide had turned, and everyone in that chamber could feel it. High Counselor Vrethon was the last to move. He stood before Webb with his 4 eyes fixed on the human's face. I do not trust you, he said bluntly. I do not believe your talk of equality and cooperation. Power does not share itself willingly. And watch us, Webb replied. Watch what we build. Judge us by our actions, not our words. And if we fail to live up to our promises, if we become the tyrants we claim to oppose, then fight us. Fight us the way we fought you, because you will be right to do so. Something flickered in Vrethon's eyes. Perhaps respect. Perhaps simply exhaustion. Very well. I will watch. And I will remember what you said today. The treaty was signed that afternoon. Representatives from humanity, the Velkhani, the Morthani, and dozens of other species added their marks to a document that would reshape the galaxy. The old council was dissolved. In its place arose the Galactic Federation of Free Systems, dedicated to the principles humanity had fought for as the sun set on Nexus Prime. Admiral Grant stood at the great windows of the station and watched the lights of 1,000 ships illuminate the void. Human vessels and Velkhani warships and Morthani transports, all flying together toward an uncertain future. Lucy Park joined him at the window. We did it, she said quietly. I did not think we would, but we did. We started something, Chris corrected. The hard work is just beginning. Building is always harder than breaking. Do you think it will last? This federation, this alliance? Do you think they will really learn to trust each other? Chris was silent for a long moment. I do not know, he admitted. But I know that 6 years ago, no one believed we could survive first contact with the Council. No one believed 43 ships could defeat 300. No one believed a single species could inspire a galactic revolution. He smiled. Humanity has a long history of doing impossible things. Maybe this is just one more across the galaxy on 1,000 worlds. Beings who had spent their lives under the Council's shadow looked up at the stars and saw something new. Not the cold light of a universe ruled by fear, but the warm glow of possibility. They called it hope, and thanks to humanity, it was spreading. On Earth, the news arrived in the early hours of morning. People poured into the streets, laughing and crying and embracing strangers. They had faced extinction and survived. They had challenged an empire and won. They had proven that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle. Secretary General Webb returned home a month later, exhausted but satisfied. When reporters asked him how he felt about humanity's victory, he shook his head. It was not a victory, he said. It was a beginning. We showed the galaxy that another way was possible. Now we have to prove that we meant what we said. We have to be better than the Council was. We have to build something worthy of the sacrifice that brought us here. And if we fail, Webb smiled. Then we try again. That is what humans do. We fall down, and we get back up. We make mistakes, and we learn from them. We face impossible odds, and we refuse to quit. He looked up at the stars that now held friends instead of enemies. The Council thought they were unbeatable. They were wrong, and anyone who bets against humanity in the future will be wrong too. The galaxy would face many challenges in the centuries to come. There would be setbacks and conflicts and moments when the dream seemed ready to die. But always, at the heart of it all, there would be a stubborn species from a small blue planet who refused to accept that anything was impossible. They had proven it once, they would prove it again and again and again.